If you're considering a compact changeable lens camera with a great sensor and lens selection, I know Fujifilm cameras are on your short list. The Fujifilm X-T1 has 3 big improvements over earlier models that make this one a great pick. Hi, I'm Larry Becker. Because the new X-T1 has a 16.3 megapixel sensor like the X Pro one, which came out a couple years ago, people might be curious if the improvements that the X-T1 brings to the Fujifilm mirrorless line are really dramatic. They are. Several major differences make this a totally different user experience, especially the new focusing system, the new EVF, and Wi-Fi. And for me, each of these 3 differences on their own makes the camera worth the slightly higher price. First, there's the greatly improved focusing options and somewhat enhanced autofocus response. This is thanks to the newer X-Trans CMOS II sensor and the intelligent hybrid AF system, which uses both phase detection and contrast detection focusing. Even though both cameras have 49 contrast detection autofocus points, I found the X-T1 to be faster and more accurate than even the firmware updated X Pro one due to the embedded phase detection with the X-T1, specifically when I was shooting bursts and tracking with autofocus. And I really like the manual focusing options, especially when I'm using that EVF. I even like the tilting LCD, but I only use that indoors. There's also a cool split screen focusing option that now lets you see the whole image to the left, and on the right, there's a zoomed-in detailed view for finer adjustments. It can even be set up like rangefinder focusing, or you can use focus peaking, or just look at the image detail at 100%. Now, I used to say I don't even like electronic viewfinders, but these days I back down a bit, and I prefer an optical viewfinder. That said, EVFs keep getting better, and this one is tied for first place as my favorite EVF. Of course, the upside of any EVF is the gain boost that lets you see details in low light that you don't get with an optical viewfinder. But this EVF is not only a high-resolution OLED, but it's physically large, and it offers 0.77x magnification. It's the best viewfinder I've seen from Fujifilm, and I like it even better than that offset hybrid multi-viewfinder that's on the X Pro one. Another great feature of the X-T1 is the built-in Wi-Fi. Of course, you can transfer images and videos, but as with all cameras that have Wi-Fi, the main benefit to image transfer is so that you can quickly upload small-size files to the web. Actually, transferring large numbers of full-size files to your computer isn't really practical. But my favorite use for any built-in Wi-Fi is when the manufacturer has a free smartphone app that serves as a remote control with a preview. Fujifilm has done a nice job with their app because you have control of all kinds of things besides just the shutter. You can control most every setting related to your exposure. You can change the film simulation Fuji is known for, and you can even control the flash settings remotely. While I didn't haul out a bunch of competing cameras for side-by-side testing, I'm really comfortable saying that the high ISO, low-light performance of this camera can stand toe-to-toe with any APS-C camera on the market today. The native range is 200 to 6400, and most of my ISO 3200 and some of my ISO 6400 images were usable. The ISO can also be expanded down to 100 or up to 51,200, but I should note that the expanded values will only work with JPEG images, not RAW. While I was testing ISO performance, I was set to capture RAW files only, and my expanded ISO range images were always saved as JPEGs. Now, the form factor of this weather-resistant magnesium alloy body handles well, and I love the feel and functionality of the dials. The ISO and shutter speed dials both have locks, and the movement feels quite good. The only ergonomics that fall a little short for me are the movement of the drive dial and the metering dial. And I'd like the selector/function buttons to be raised a bit more and have a better texture for operation while the camera is held up to my eye. I like moving the focus point around while my eye is up to the viewfinder, and while I could do it with a little bit of practice, the buttons aren't really defined enough to easily do it without concentrating on what you're doing. And if you have gloves on like in the winter, you'll just have to look. And since I'm left eye dominant, my nose kind of gets in the way of those controls a bit. The X-T1 doesn't have a built-in pop-up flash, but it has a hot shoe for external flashes. I tested a third-party flash and it worked just fine. But the nice thing about the EF X8 flash that comes with the X-T1 is that it's small, lightweight, and the X-T1 can control it for TTL flash metering. Burst shooting with the full-time autofocus is surprisingly good. The autofocus was pretty good at tracking moving subjects too. Just be aware that the spec sheet doesn't really explain what to expect from your burst captures. You can shoot up to 8 frames per second bursts, and the spec sheet says that you can get 47 shots before the buffer gets full. Now my experience was a little different. With a Class 10 card, I was able to get around 79 full-size JPEGs, and they cleared the buffer in around 20 seconds. But with RAW images, I got around 19 shots per burst, and it took almost a minute to clear the buffer. In this class of cameras, Fujifilm is noted for their sensors because they don't have an optical low-pass filter, and because of the randomized pixel pattern, moire pattern interference isn't a problem. Fuji is also known for having a nice selection of good quality glass, and I tested 2 lenses with this camera. The XF 18-55mm f2.8 to f4 RLM OIS lens. Now that's a 35mm equivalent focal length to a 27-84mm lens. It feels solid and the zoom ring travel is really nice. It has an aperture ring so that you can flip the auto aperture switch to manual and then use that ring to control your aperture. And the focus ring up front feels natural and it works well. And in spite of the aperture and focus rings being controlled by wire rather than direct mechanical controls, I love that there's just no lag. It feels right. The images I shot with that lens were optically very good. I also got to test the XF 35mm f1.4R. This 53mm equivalent lens was a pleasure to use. Rather than a switch, the marked aperture ring has an auto position in addition to the marked detents. And if you want to take portraits or work with a shallow depth of field, the bokeh and soft out of focus areas look beautiful. Fujifilm in-camera JPEG processing offers a few things that are exclusive and consistent with the Fujifilm DNA. For example, there are film simulation modes that can produce the look of Provia, Velvia, Astia, Sepia, and several monochrome options. But shooting with this X-T1 reminded me that even unretouched camera raw files have accurate, vivid color. Green grass was especially green even before I pushed a single slider. Now I'm sure lots of photographers these days are used to shooting RAW, and you might even have a standard RAW workflow. If you shoot RAW and this is your first Fujifilm camera, just be aware that you might not need to push that vibrant slider as much as you're used to. The compact changeable lens mirrorless camera market is maturing, and this camera in particular stands solidly at the top of the Fujifilm lineup. Oh, and when you get your Fujifilm X-T1, be sure to go back to the B&H website, find the camera, and click on that banner above the product photo that says Hands-On Learning. You'll find a comprehensive free class all about using the X-T1, and you might never have to look at the manual. For B&H and Kelby One, I'm Larry Becker. Thanks for watching.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.
Scott Kelby here, and welcome to this quick tour of our online training. We have hundreds of online classes for you, covering everything from lighting to landscape photography. From portrait photography to sports, we have classes on wedding, automotive photography, shooting, food, fashion, travel, you name it. The most incredible part of this is the price. You get all of this for just $199 a year, or you can pay monthly for just $24.95. 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week access from anywhere in the world. I invite you to join with us today and start learning right now.